125 years ago, a new school celebrated its opening with a spelling bee and the singing of Home Sweet Home. It was 1882, the same year electric lighting came to the United States and Old West outlaw Jesse James was shot and killed, and 14 years before Henry Ford constructed his first horseless carriage. The school was Healdsburg Academy, the only Adventist school in the West, and it opened with 2 teachers and 26 students. Eventually, the school became Healdsburg College, and then Pacific Union College. For its first 26 years, the school remained in Healdsburg. Back then, student life was just a little different than it is today. This was the tail end of the Old West, and America was busy with the spread of the railroad, women's suffrage, and the invention of the car. Students studied shoemaking and blacksmithing and took care of school cows, horses, and gardens, in addition to studying subjects like history, Greek, and practical missionary labors. The first student publication came out 2 years after the school opened. It was called the Student Workshop and was published once a month. You could subscribe to the Student Workshop for 50 cents a year. At a Sabbath school rally, the money was raised for the Healdsburg Bell, which hangs in our bell tower today. It still calls the PUC community to worship and is rung by graduating seniors at the end of the year. In 1893, charges for room, lights, plain washing, tuition, and board for the school year were $161.50 for sunny rooms and $142.50 for attic rooms. Student life had thorough guidelines. A visitor to the college in 1896 observed the following evening schedule.
After the working hour is over, each student can use the time until evening worship as he likes, never visiting the town, however, without permission of the president. At 6:15, the bells ring for evening worship, when all are expected to be in attendance. Then follows the silent hour, after which all retire to their respective rooms for study. No talking above a whisper is then allowed in any part of the building. The study hour is continued until 9:30. when all lights must be put out and the students retire to rest.
Pacific Union College had rather humble beginnings in a setting very different from today's California culture. But those pioneers of the Adventist movement, the hardworking teachers and leaders, started PUC on a mission that would make it a crucial player in Western American education. From its earliest years, the teachers were determined to train young people for lives of service, a purpose that remains at the core of PUC's mission today.
In the late 1800s, Howell Mountain had a local reputation as the healthiest place on earth, and for many years Edwin Angwin ran a health resort here that drew city dwellers and health seekers. Meanwhile, Pacific Union College was still located in Healdsburg until 1908, when it closed because of financial troubles. The church began looking for a country location where the school could have a fresh start. They purchased the Angwin Resort in 1909, paying $60,000 for the 1,636 acres. Classes started just a few weeks later. The girls lived in the hotel, and the boys lived in tents and barn lofts. Church was held in the old dance hall. There was no electricity for the first few years, and the only warm place on really cold days was the hotel dining room with its big wood heater. The first new building to go up was Groff Hall, which became the girls' dorm. Faculty and students, and 2 oxen named Tom and Hercules, did most of the clearing and building work using local lumber and a sawmill. Next to come was Irwin Hall. They had to scrape 8,000 yards of fill from the hillside and dump it to make the promontory on which Irwin Hall now stands. Newton's sons earned 10 cents per ton of debris that they dumped down the hill. Shifts worked constantly, day and night, on the promontory and cutting and hauling trees for lumber. Meanwhile, to get from the train station in St. Helena to PUC, you could take the old college surrey pulled by 4 horses and with room for 21 passengers. It took about 2 hours to get up the hill. The first car at PUC was Professor Newton's and was called the Ark. It was towed into Angwin by a team of horses in 1910. It had right-hand drive, 2 cylinders, motor under the seat, and gas tank in front. It couldn't leave the garage in the wintertime, but it was the terror of the neighborhood the rest of the year. Farmers in Pope Valley petitioned the county supervisors to make Newton stay off the road, and they would go to St. Helena by way of Childs Valley rather than chance meeting it on the mountain. During its early years in Angwin, PUC ran industries that ranged from a dairy and a chicken farm to a bindery. There was even a short-lived lampshade industry. The college grew in enrollment and diversity, and the campus expanded with new architecture, academic programs, and social events. The hard labor of building a new campus was done by students, faculty, and staff, but they seemed to think it was worth it. One graduate of those early days said, "There may be a better college somewhere, but if so, I'd like to see it."
The 1930s and 40s were a time of growth for Pacific Union College. Campus changes included the building of what became Clark Hall and the first Pollen Hall, which is now Stauffer. During the mid-30s, getting off the hill got a little easier. A new route from Pope Valley to St. Helena made it possible to leave Angwin and return to the hill in the same day. Recreational activities included school-sponsored picnics to Pope Valley. Snowball fights and makeshift sleds fashioned from cafeteria trays also became popular every once in a while when the campus got over 20 inches of snow. In 1949, Angwin had a total of 36.5 inches. When World War II began, a number of students and alumni volunteered their services. In 1943, 17 of the 60 doctors of the 47th General Hospital were former PUC students. By 1944, more than 400 students and alumni were in military service. In spite of student involvement in the war, however, the dorms were always full. At first, some in Angwin thought the small town was likely target for Axis air power, and an elaborate civil defense organization was set up. The community was divided into 16 zones, and 26 wardens enforced the blackout. They also had air raid drills, and civil defense hospital units were stored in the gym basement. In 1946, women's nylons were rationed because most of the nation's nylon had been used for parachutes. One day in February, lines of girls began to form outside the college store at 5:30 in the morning. Only 54 pairs were available to the girls who were let out early from classes and worship. Meanwhile, as technology advanced and marvels like the RCA Victor phonograph and the first microwave oven became more common, PUC enjoyed a certain renaissance of its own. Professor Newton sponsored the installation of a 14-inch reflecting telescope in 1932. The structure, later named after Newton, was located in the middle of the college's large prune orchard. In 1948, a new fire truck was built in the engineering and machine shop using an old Navy vehicle. With all these developments taking place on a well-established campus that was nearing its 70th birthday, the years of PUC's infancy were well past. As enrollment increased and new buildings were added to the growing campus, the words of college president Walter Smith became a popular slogan. "It's a privilege to be at PUC."
The 50s and 60s were a legendary and often restless time for America. Elvis Presley, the Cold War, the American Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam, and the first man on the moon were just a few of the big events. PUC was also experiencing changes and debates, though not on quite such a world-shaking level. For one thing, the question of dress code was ongoing. On one occasion in the 50s, the girls draped their mandatory hosiery over campus bushes to proclaim their preferences for Oxfords and bobby socks. In the 1970s, girls were officially allowed to wear matching pantsuits to class. Physical changes in Angwin through the 50s and 60s included the county road being shifted to its current path through town, and the opening of the airport, the church, New Paulin Hall, and the library. Dial telephone service came to Angwin in 1957. Dorm phones were installed 10 years later, one for every 20 students or so. Though the sense of campus community was changing, there were still plenty of practical jokes. These included organized door slams in the girls' dorms, letting loose scores of farm animals in the library, and the Christmas caroling tradition. One year, the boys' dorm took shifts for an all-night serenade to Andre Hall. For a while, anybody walking past Granger or Newton was in danger of getting pegged with a well-aimed water balloon, even if they were a visiting academy principal. Despite its rural location and busy campus life, PUC was not immune to national happenings. Letters to the editor in the Campus Chronicle sometimes dealt with communism or why America was in Vietnam. Students were politically active, holding political emphasis weeks with student debates and presentations by congressional candidates and state assemblymen. In the late 50s, enrollment started going up significantly each year. Students during these 20 years included such familiar faces as Malcolm Maxwell, Richard Voth, James Chase, and Rosemary Hardcastle Collins. The campus was busy and thriving even as it dealt with the many questions of the era. In an address in the 50s, an alumnus of the class of 1912 said, "I have a passion that the men and women of this college should develop a loyalty to their college, to the eternal principles on which it was founded, and to each other, so strong that we could stand on it."
The campus was hopping during the 70s and 80s, especially during the enrollment boom that peaked at 2,290 students in 1976. The college also celebrated its 100th birthday in 1982. Campus life was beginning to look much more like what we know today. The dairy and chicken farm closed. The age of modern computing began. Beards were allowed, as was wearing jeans to class. Televisions in the dorms were approved on a trial basis in 1989. New features on campus included the current Dining Commons building, various unpopular control gates on campus roads, Chan Shun Hall, and the Rieger organ. In 1982, in the midst of a major campus controversy, the front section of the iconic Irwin Hall was torn down. Before that, an even more intense controversy occurred when Desmond Ford spoke about the investigative judgment at an Adventist forum meeting on campus. A heated worldwide theological debate and on-campus controversy resulted. There was also the question of competition in sports. Though intramurals were well established, the big question was whether the college should allow on-campus intercollegiate games with other Adventist colleges. Student faces on campus during these 2 decades included Aubin Fulton, Jennifer Schmunk Wareham Best, Elaine Newdeck, Cliff Roosh, and Steve Waters. These students and their classmates were probably familiar with the annual Angwin to Anguish race, the hockey club playing every week at Snoopy's ice rink, and the toy dart guns that appeared for a campus-wide version of the popular game Assassin. Well-known musicians and speakers came to campus, including Bruce Jenner and Ellen DeGeneres, and essay events consistently packed the gym. In 1973, the gas shortage reached Angwin. Long lines formed, sometimes beginning the previous evening. "Don't send us any more letters," said the state and federal departments of energy. "We have a whole file just for Angwin complaints." As the campus scenery and culture became more like what we see today, students continued to find ways to accompany their studies on the Hill with plenty of fun, memories, friendships, and service.
The 90s up through today have been characterized by the questions and events of the changing century. In the 90s, the Campus Chronicle featured discussions about the Gulf War, homosexuality, and what Y2K might bring. There was a bit of uproar after a 12-page full-color paid ad about abortion was printed by the Human Life Alliance of Minnesota in the Campus Chronicle. There was also a big debate about selling land and the possible development of a golf course. The window tree was removed, and Clark Hall underwent serious renovations. The college felt the impact of national questions, such as capital punishment, and church questions, such as women's ordination. In the first years of the 21st century, PUC has experienced a rapidly increasing emphasis on the media, from the internet to television and film. Cell phones and related technology have become a common aspect of life. Perhaps influenced by 9/11 and the war in Iraq, student groups are increasingly focused on global and social awareness. Today, looking back over the 125 years of PUC's existence, we see a continuous process of change. Fashion changes, bringing new hairstyles and clothes. Our methods of transportation change. New structures and renovations alter the look of the campus. There has also been much change in social and political issues and in questions of religion and church. But there are also many things that have stayed the same on this campus. Core elements that remain constant, such as the ongoing quest for connection with God and a relevant religion, the excellence of academics and the interactions between students and teachers, a full schedule of events and adventures, and students starting lifetime friendships. And of course, a steady stream of students working to make their faith practical by serving and contributing to their community. These are the constants that make PUC what it was for all the previous alumni, what it is for us today, and what it promises to be for future students. At PUC's 100-year celebration, College President John Castle summed up the dream for the college when he said, "Let us determine to preserve those educational and spiritual standards that have distinguished this college over the years, and dedicate ourselves and every means at our command to making PUC an even better place in the years to come."